You think a great white shark is terrifying?
A full-grown great white can bite down with about 4,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. That's enough to shear through bone, muscle, and blubber like they're made of wet paper. But there was something in the oceans 66 million years ago that made great whites look like goldfish at a pet store. I'm talking about a creature that could bite down with an estimated 13,000 to 16,000 pounds per square inch. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the same force as parking 3 full-sized SUVs on a single square inch of your hand. This thing didn't just hunt in the ocean. It owned every single cubic meter of water from the surface down to the pitch-black depths. Its jaws could open wide enough to swallow an adult human whole without even touching the sides. When paleontologists first started piecing together the fossils of this monster, they genuinely struggled to believe what the measurements were telling them, because the numbers suggested something that shouldn't be able to exist. An ocean predator so large, so powerful, and so perfectly designed for killing that it had virtually no competition for over 25 million years. This was Mosasaurus, and it was deadlier than anything swimming in our oceans today. Let's start with the primary weapon, the thing that made Mosasaurus an extinction-level event for anything unlucky enough to share the water. The skull alone measured up to 6 feet long in the largest specimens. That's the height of an average door frame. But size is only part of the story. The jaw structure was where the real nightmare began. Mosasaurus had a double-hinged jaw system, similar to modern snakes, that allowed it to disarticulate its lower jaw and swing it outward. This meant it could grab prey much larger than its head and work it down its throat through a series of ratcheting motions. The teeth were another level of horror entirely. We're talking about dozens of recurved, blade-like teeth, each one measuring up to 2 inches long in smaller species and potentially larger in the biggest individuals. These weren't the triangular serrated teeth of a shark designed to saw through flesh. These were conical, razor-sharp daggers built to pierce, grip, and hold. And they pointed backward. Once Mosasaurus bit down on something, that prey wasn't getting away. The teeth would sink in deeper with every struggle. Fossil evidence shows us exactly how devastating this system was. Paleontologists have found fossilized bones from plesiosaurs, sea turtles, and other marine reptiles with Mosasaurus tooth marks punched clean through them. We're talking about puncture wounds that went through 2 inches of bone. The bite force calculations come from computer modeling of the skull structure, jaw muscle attachment points, and comparison with modern crocodilians. The results were staggering. This was a bite powerful enough to crush a car door. Mosasaurus stretched between 40 to 60 feet in length, depending on the species, with some fragmentary evidence suggesting certain individuals might have pushed even larger. To give you a reference point, that's longer than a standard school bus and approaching the length of a bowling lane. The largest confirmed specimens would have weighed somewhere between 30,000 to 40,000 pounds. That's roughly 15 to 20 tons, about the weight of 4 full-grown African elephants or a loaded dump truck. But don't picture some slow, lumbering giant wallowing through the water. Mosasaurus was built like a biological torpedo. The body was streamlined and hydrodynamic, with a powerful tail that featured a distinctive crescent-shaped fluke, similar to modern sharks and some whales. This tail structure is critical because it tells us about locomotion. Mosasaurus wasn't an undulating swimmer like an eel. It was a thuniform swimmer, meaning it generated thrust through powerful side-to-side beats of that massive tail. Studies analyzing the vertebral column structure suggest this thing could reach burst speeds of 30 miles per hour in the water. That might not sound impressive until you realize that's faster than Olympic swimmers can sprint, and comparable to the cruising speed of a bottlenose dolphin. Now imagine that speed combined with 40 feet of muscle and teeth accelerating toward you from below. The flippers were modified limbs, evolved into paddle-like structures that provided steering and stability rather than primary propulsion. 4 flippers in total, positioned to allow for incredibly tight turning radius and 3-dimensional maneuverability. This wasn't some clumsy prehistoric relic. This was a precision killing machine. Beyond the jaws and the speed, Mosasaurus packed multiple redundant killing systems. The skin itself was covered in diamond-shaped scales that created a rough, abrasive surface. Fossilized skin impressions show a texture similar to shark skin, which would have reduced drag in the water while providing protection against the bites and scratches of prey. Inside that massive skull was a brain case that suggests fairly sophisticated sensory processing. The eye sockets were enormous, positioned to provide binocular vision for depth perception. This was a visual hunter that could track prey in 3-dimensional space and calculate intercept trajectories. Some research suggests Mosasaurus may have had an additional sense organ in the snout, similar to the ampullae of Lorenzini in sharks, allowing it to detect the electrical fields generated by muscle contractions in other animals. If true, This meant Mosasaurus could hunt in complete darkness or murky water by sensing the bioelectric signature of prey from several meters away. The teeth replacement system was industrial in its efficiency. Like all mosasaurs, this thing was constantly growing and shedding teeth throughout its life. Lose a tooth in a struggle? No problem. Another one rotates into position within weeks. This continuous replacement meant Mosasaurus always had a fresh set of killing tools ready to deploy. And unlike mammals, which stop growing after reaching maturity, evidence suggests Mosasaurus continued growing throughout its entire life, with the oldest and largest individuals being the most dangerous predators in the ecosystem. Mosasaurus hunted using an ambush and pursuit strategy that combined the patient stalking of a crocodile with the explosive acceleration of a shark. Fossil evidence from sites like the Pembina Gorge in Manitoba and the Pierre Shale in Kansas shows us exactly what this thing was eating. The stomach contents and bite mark analysis reveal a diet that included virtually everything in the late Cretaceous oceans. Large bony fish like the 5-foot-long Xiphactinus were on the menu. Sea turtles, including species with shells over 3 feet in diameter, show characteristic Mosasaurus bite damage, with the shells punched through or crushed entirely. Plesiosaurs, those long-necked marine reptiles that could reach 20 feet in length, have been found with Mosasaurus tooth marks on their vertebrae and flippers. Even other mosasaurs weren't safe. Fossil evidence of cannibalism exists, with smaller mosasaur bones showing feeding traces consistent with Mosasaurus dentition. The hunting method was devastatingly simple. Mosasaurus would cruise through the water column, likely at moderate depths where light levels created contrast in shadows. When prey was detected, either visually or through electrical sensing, the attack would come from below and behind. That powerful tail would propel the body forward in a burst of acceleration, closing the distance in seconds. The jaws would open to nearly 90 degrees, and then snap shut with hydraulic force, driving those backward-pointing teeth through flesh, bone, and organs. The prey would be violently thrashed side to side, a behavior called the death roll that modern crocodiles still use, which would tear off chunks of meat or disorient the victim into helplessness. For a creature this size, daily caloric requirements would have been massive. Estimates suggest an adult Mosasaurus needed between 500 to 1,000 pounds of meat per day to maintain its metabolism. That's equivalent to eating 4 to 8 adult humans every single day, or roughly 1 medium-sized sea turtle every morning. What made Mosasaurus particularly terrifying was the accumulation of advantages that other marine predators didn't possess. While we can't say definitively whether Mosasaurus was fully warm-blooded, bone microstructure analysis suggests it was at minimum mesothermic, meaning it could maintain a body temperature higher than the surrounding water. This is massive. Cold-blooded marine reptiles are limited by water temperature and become sluggish in cooler conditions. A mesothermic or warm-blooded Mosasaurus could maintain peak performance regardless of water temperature, allowing it to hunt in deeper, colder water where prey might seek refuge. It could also maintain higher sustained swimming speeds without the metabolic limitations that handicapped other reptiles. The reproduction strategy was live birth, with females giving birth to fully formed young rather than laying eggs on beaches like sea turtles. This eliminated the vulnerability period where eggs could be raided by predators, and meant juvenile Mosasaurus could be born directly into the ocean environment, already equipped to hunt smaller prey. Studies of growth rates based on bone histology show that Mosasaurus grew rapidly during its first decade of life, reaching functional adulthood within 10 to 15 years, but continuing to grow slowly afterward. The largest individuals were likely 30 to 40 years old, possibly older, and throughout that entire lifespan, they were learning, adapting, and perfecting their killing techniques. The combination of size, speed, sensory acuity, and metabolic efficiency created an apex predator with essentially no natural enemies once it reached adult size. Juvenile Mosasaurus certainly fell victim to sharks and other large predators, but an adult Mosasaurus in its prime was functionally invincible in the late Cretaceous seas. To understand just how dominant Mosasaurus was, you need to understand what it was competing against. The late Cretaceous oceans, roughly 70 to 66 million years ago, were dramatically different from today's seas. Global temperatures were higher, with no polar ice caps. Sea levels were hundreds of feet higher than present day, flooding vast areas of the continents and creating shallow inland seas across North America, Europe, and other landmasses. These warm, shallow seas were incredibly productive ecosystems, teeming with life at every level of the food chain. The water temperature in these inland seas could reach 80 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, creating ideal conditions for marine reptiles. And the competition was fierce. Sharing these waters were giant sharks, including the 20-foot-long Squalocorax, which had triangular serrated teeth and hunted in packs. There were massive sea turtles like Archelon, with shells spanning 13 feet from front to back. Plesiosaurs of various species patrolled the open water, some with necks longer than their bodies, designed for ambushing fish schools. And there were other mosasaurs, different species competing for the same prey base. Tylosaurus, a closely related mosasaur, could reach similar sizes and occupied a nearly identical ecological niche. When Mosasaurus and Tylosaurus territories overlapped, the result was likely violent confrontation. Fossil evidence from both species shows healed injuries consistent with bites from other large mosasaurs, suggesting these giants fought for territory, food, and mating rights. But mosasaurs had the edge in jaw power and robustness. The prey base was almost unlimited. The seas were filled with ammonites, those coiled shell cephalopods that could grow to massive sizes. Schools of fish migrated through the water in clouds so dense they darkened the water. Squid, both the shelled nautiloid varieties and the soft-bodied ancestors of modern squid, provided high-protein meals. This was an ocean where a 50-foot predator could genuinely thrive without running out of food. For over 25 million years, Mosasaurus and its close relatives dominated the oceans in a way that no marine predator has since. They evolved into dozens of different species, each one adapted to slightly different prey or different ocean regions. Some mosasaurs specialized in crushing shellfish with blunt teeth. Others evolved longer, more slender jaws for catching fast fish. But Mosasaurus itself remained the generalist apex predator, capable of taking down virtually anything it encountered. The geographic range was global. Mosasaurus fossils have been found on every continent, including Antarctica, which was much warmer during the Cretaceous. From the western interior seaway that split North America in half to the ancient Tethys Sea that stretched across what is now Europe and the Middle East, Mosasaurus ruled the waves. There was no ocean refuge, no safe depth, no protective strategy that guaranteed survival if Mosasaurus decided you were food. The fossil record shows us moments frozen in time. A Mosasaurus skeleton found with a fish skeleton still lodged in its throat, the predator having choked to death on an oversized meal. Another fossil showing a Mosasaurus with a healed jaw fracture, evidence that even a broken jaw wasn't enough to kill this thing. It survived, adapted, and kept hunting. We've found bite marks on the fossilized bones of pterosaurs, the flying reptiles of the Mesozoic, suggesting Mosasaurus would launch itself partially out of the water to snatch prey from the air or the surface. This was a predator without limits, without fear, and without mercy. So what killed Mosasaurus? What could possibly eliminate a predator this successful, this adaptable, this dominant? The answer is the same catastrophe that wiped out the non-avian dinosaurs. 66 million years ago, a 6-mile-wide asteroid slammed into what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, with the force of 10 billion nuclear bombs. The impact vaporized rock, sent superheated debris into the atmosphere, and triggered global wildfires. But the kill mechanism for ocean life was different than for land animals. The immediate shockwave created mega tsunamis that scoured coastlines and churned the shallow seas into chaos. The debris cloud that darkened the sky didn't just cool the planet. It shut down photosynthesis for months, possibly years. And when you shut down photosynthesis in the ocean, you kill the phytoplankton. When you kill the phytoplankton, you collapse the base of the entire marine food chain. The small fish that ate the plankton died. The larger fish that ate those fish died. The marine reptiles and sharks that ate those larger fish starved. Mosasaurus, sitting at the very top of this pyramid, watched its food supply evaporate within a generation. A creature that needed 500 to 1,000 pounds of meat per day cannot survive in an ocean where prey populations have collapsed by 75% or more. Adult Mosasaurus likely survived for months, maybe even a year or two, using their stored fat reserves and scavenging whatever carcasses sank to the bottom. But without a functioning ecosystem to sustain them, starvation was inevitable. The juveniles died first, unable to find enough food to support their rapid growth. Without successful reproduction and recruitment of new generations, the population spiraled into terminal decline. Within perhaps 10,000 years of the impact, possibly much faster, Mosasaurus was extinct. Not because it was weak, not because it was poorly adapted, but because the world it was built for ceased to exist. Today's oceans have nothing that compares to Mosasaurus. The largest predator now is the orca, which maxes out at around 32 feet and 12,000 pounds. Orcas are brilliant social hunters that use cooperation and intelligence to take down prey. But they're still only half the length and a fraction of the mass of the largest Mosasaurus. Great white sharks, the iconic ocean predators of the modern era, reach about 20 feet and 5,000 pounds. They're impressive, but they're operating in a completely different weight class. The niche that Mosasaurus occupied, that of a solitary, giant-bodied, hypercarnivorous marine reptile, has never been refilled. The closest ecological analog might be the extinct megalodon, a giant shark that lived millions of years after Mosasaurus and could reach 60 feet in length. But Megalodon hunted primarily marine mammals like whales. Mosasaurus hunted everything. The reason we don't have anything like Mosasaurus today comes down to ocean productivity and evolutionary history. Modern oceans, while productive, don't support the same density of large-bodied prey that the warm, shallow Cretaceous seas did. And the mass extinction that killed Mosasaurus reset marine ecosystems entirely. By the time marine predators re-evolved to large sizes in the Cenozoic era, they did so along different evolutionary pathways. Sharks expanded into the apex predator role. Later, marine mammals like whales and seals evolved from land animals and filled various niches. But the mosasaurs were gone forever, taking with them a body plan and predatory strategy that evolution has never recreated. When you swim in the ocean today, you're moving through an ecosystem that Mosasaurus would have dominated absolutely. And maybe it's better that it's gone, because in an ocean patrolled by 50-foot marine reptiles with jaws that could crush bone and speeds that could run down fleeing prey, there would be nowhere safe to swim. And hey, I'll catch you next time.